The mountains were never supposed to look like this. At first, the snow had been manageable, thin, drifting sheets that brushed past the helicopter's windows like ash. But within minutes, the weather turned savage. Wind slammed into the aircraft with violent force, rattling metal and forcing the pilot to fight for stability. White swallowed the horizon. There was no sky anymore, no ground, only motion and noise. When the helicopter finally pulled away, it vanished almost instantly, erased by the storm as if it had never existed. 6 operators from the United States Navy SEALs stood alone in the valley, their dark shapes swallowed by endless white. Snow screamed across the terrain, biting exposed skin and crawling into every seam of their gear. The temperature dropped so fast it felt unnatural, like the mountain itself had decided they did not belong. The team leader raised his fist, signaling a halt. The men closed ranks automatically, boots crunching against ice-packed ground. Each breath came out sharp and shallow, instantly stolen by the wind. Their night vision optics struggled, static crawling across the lenses as the storm interfered with electronics. This wasn't in the forecast. Their mission had been clear: track and capture a high-value enemy commander believed to be moving through the region. A fast insertion, minimal resistance, extract before dawn, the kind of operation they had trained for hundreds of times. But plans didn't survive weather like this. "Radio check," the team leader said, his voice calm despite the chaos. Static answered. He tried again, nothing. Satellite uplink failed seconds later. The digital map on their wrist displays froze, then went blank. GPS drifted uselessly before shutting down entirely. They were blind. The valley closed around them, steep rock walls hidden behind curtains of snow. The wind howled so loudly it drowned out everything else. Commands had to be shouted directly into ears. Hand signals became hard to see past a few feet. The team moved anyway. They advanced slowly, methodically, spacing tight to avoid losing one another in the storm. Every step required effort as snow climbed past their boots. Their weapons iced over despite constant checks. Fingers numbed inside gloves. Time stretched strangely. Minutes felt longer, heavier. Then the first warning came. A shape moved at the edge of visibility, just a flicker, too deliberate to be snow. The rear operator turned, scanning. Nothing. The storm closed again, erasing the moment. They pressed on. Somewhere above them, unseen and unheard, a scope tracked their movement. The SEALs reached a narrow pass where the valley tightened into a natural choke point, the kind of terrain every soldier learned to fear. The team slowed, tension coiling in their bodies. Their instincts screamed danger. That was when the storm shifted. The wind changed direction abruptly, lifting snow into the air and thinning the whiteout for just a heartbeat. Gunfire erupted. Muzzle flashes exploded from the ridgelines on both sides. The sound cracked like thunder, echoing violently off rock and ice. Bullets tore into the snow around them, sending up violent sprays of white. "Contact, contact," someone shouted. One operator went down hard, a round ripping through his leg. He screamed once before clamping down, teeth grinding as another SEAL dragged him behind what little cover the terrain offered. The team returned fire, but visibility was almost non-existent. They fired at flashes, shadows, movement, anything. The enemy had the high ground in the storm. It was a perfect kill zone. Snow swallowed sound. Commands barely carried. The storm turned chaos into confusion. Then crack. The sound was different from the rest, sharper, cleaner. An enemy gunner on the ridge jerked backward and disappeared from view. For a split second, no one understood what had happened. Then crack. Another flash. Another enemy dropped, lifeless, sliding down the slope before vanishing into the storm. The enemy fire faltered. The SEALs froze, eyes scanning upward. That wasn't their shot. No one on the team had an angle like that. A third shot rang out, followed by a scream cut short. Silence crept in where gunfire had been. The wind continued its relentless howl, but the ambush was broken. The enemy retreated into the white, confused and suddenly afraid. The team regrouped, breathing hard. Blood soaked into the snow beneath their wounded man. The team leader scanned the ridgeline through binoculars fogged by frost. Nothing. No movement, no silhouette. Whoever had fired those shots was gone. Did command send overwatch? Someone asked, disbelief clear in his voice. The team leader shook his head slowly. Negative. No one was logged in this sector. The realization settled heavy. Someone else was out here. Someone skilled enough to engage in a blizzard, alone from elevation. Someone who had just saved their lives and chosen not to reveal themselves. The SEALs didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The storm had cut them off from the world, dropped them into enemy territory, and stripped away every advantage they had. And somewhere in the frozen mountains, a lone sniper remained hidden, already planning her next move, because leaving now would mean letting them die. The silence after the ambush felt unnatural. Snow continued to fall, thick and relentless, but the gunfire was gone. The wind howled through the mountain pass, carrying echoes that made it impossible to tell how far the enemy had retreated, or if they had retreated at all. The SEALs remained frozen in place, weapons raised, breathing controlled despite the cold burning their lungs. Perimeter, the team leader ordered. They spread out carefully, covering every angle, each man watching the other's backs. The wounded operator was stabilized as best they could, blood already stiffening in the freezing air. Morphine dulled the pain but not the danger. If the enemy came back, evacuation wouldn't be an option. The team leader looked up toward the ridgeline again. Nothing. No tracks, no movement, no sign of the shooter who had turned the fight in their favor. Whoever it was, they had vanished as completely as the helicopter. The team moved deeper into the valley, avoiding open ground. Every step felt heavier now, not just from fatigue, but from the knowledge that they were no longer alone and not entirely in control. The storm erased footprints behind them, making pursuit harder, but also trapping them in a world without history or direction. Then the wind shifted again. A sound carried through the storm, boots crunching snow, not close, not far. Enemy patrols. The SEALs dropped low, melting into the terrain as best they could. Shapes emerged through the whiteout, dark figures moving cautiously, weapons raised, sweeping the valley with practiced discipline. These weren't irregular fighters. They were trained, organized, and they were hunting. The enemy split into two elements, flanking wide, attempting to encircle. The SEALs waited. The first patrol passed dangerously close, so near the team could hear breathing through scarves, metal clinking against gear. Fingers tightened on triggers, muscles coiled. Then crack. The lead enemy dropped without a sound, a neat hole punched through his helmet. Before anyone could react, crack. Another fell. Panic erupted. Enemy fighters scattered, firing wildly into the storm. Muzzle flashes lit the snow like brief lightning strikes. Rounds tore through empty space. But the sniper never fired twice from the same position. Shots came from different angles, above, left, then far right, creating the illusion of an entire Overwatch team. Enemy shouts turned frantic. Orders dissolved into chaos. The SEALs seized the moment. They moved fast, silent and deadly, eliminating exposed enemies with brutal efficiency. Within seconds the patrol was gone, some dead, some fled into the storm, terrified of an enemy they couldn't see. The team regrouped, adrenaline hammering through their bodies. "She's hurting them," one SEAL muttered, "whoever she is." The team leader nodded grimly. "She knows what she's doing." They advanced again, now moving with a strange confidence born from unseen protection. But every miracle had a cost. High above them, buried in a shallow snow hide, the sniper exhaled slowly. Her vision blurred at the edges. Ice had crept into her boots hours ago, numbing her toes completely. Her hands trembled between shots, not from fear but exhaustion. She forced them steady, pressing her cheek against the rifle stock, grounding herself in routine. Breathe, control, squeeze. She watched the SEALs disappear into cover below, counting heads, tracking spacing. They moved cleanly, professionally. No wasted motion. She adjusted her mental map of the valley, calculating where the enemy would move next. They would try to cut the SEALs off from higher ground. She couldn't allow that. She shifted position, crawling inch by inch to avoid detection. Every movement sent pain through her joints. She ignored it. Pain was temporary. Failure wasn't. Below, the SEALs reached a collapsed structure, stone walls half buried in snow. It wasn't much, but it was defensible. The team leader made the call to hold. Minutes passed. Then another patrol appeared. Larger this time. They moved cautiously, scanning the ridges spreading wide to avoid a repeat of earlier losses. They had learned. That made them dangerous. The sniper felt time pressing in on her chest. She waited. The enemy moved closer, too close. Then she fired. The first shot dropped the radio operator. The second took the man pointing toward the ruins. The third shattered morale completely. The enemy returned fire toward her last position, but she was already gone. She slid down the ridge, snow filling her sleeves, ice cutting into her skin. A round snapped past her head. She didn't slow. Below, the SEALs listened as chaos unfolded again, perfectly timed to keep the enemy's attention away from them. "This isn't luck," the team leader said quietly. "She's controlling the fight." The realization settled in heavily. Someone out there had chosen to stay behind. Someone had decided that keeping them alive mattered more than extraction, comfort, or safety. As darkness crept across the valley, and the storm showed no sign of easing, one truth became unavoidable. They weren't just surviving a blizzard anymore. They were being guided through it by a ghost who refused to leave. High on a ridge, hidden beneath a mound of wind-packed snow, the sniper barely breathed. Her body screamed for relief, muscles cramped, frostbite nipped at fingertips, and hunger gnawed relentlessly. But her mind was sharp, alert, precise. She had been gone for 48 hours, officially declared MIA after a previous mission had gone wrong. Her unit assumed she had been killed, swallowed by terrain or enemy fire. Command had moved on, but she hadn't. She never would. Not while the SEAL team below still lived. The snowstorm enveloped the mountain like a living wall, shifting constantly, erasing footprints, hiding obstacles, and concealing danger. Every step the team took below was a risk. Every patrol, every misstep could mean death. From her vantage point, she could see the faint flicker of movement through the whiteout, the telltale spacing of a trained squad, weapons ready, scanning every ridge and hollow. They were professional, disciplined, deadly, but unarmed against the unseen predator stalking the enemy. She adjusted her scope and checked her ammo. 12 rounds, 12 chances to save 6 lives. The stakes had never been higher. Each breath fogged inside her mask, but she forced herself to remain calm, to wait, to observe. She had been trained to be patient. She had survived worse conditions alone before, but never like this, never for this long. Memories crept in, flashbacks to her last mission, where she had been ordered to extract after completing her objective. Leaving had been the easy choice. Following orders would have meant returning to safety, filing a clean report, and disappearing into bureaucracy. But she hadn't. Something inside her refused to leave the valley unguarded. She had watched from the shadows as patrols moved into ambush positions, studied their formations, and predicted their behavior. She had already saved lives once today, and she would do it again. Below, the SEALs moved carefully, clearing snow-covered rocks and ruins for a defensible shelter. Every instinct screamed that the storm was more than nature, it was a battlefield. Visibility was near zero, radios dead, GPS useless. They relied on each other and on luck, but luck alone was not enough. They would have died if not for the unseen sniper guiding them, eliminating threats silently, precisely, and without hesitation. The sniper shifted position again, sliding down ice and rock with deliberate control, making sure her tracks would confuse any pursuers. She crawled, dragged, and balanced herself in ways that would have broken lesser soldiers. Every movement was measured, each breath calculated. The storm roared like a living beast, but she had grown accustomed to its chaos. In fact, she had learned to use it. The wind masked the sound of her shots. Blinding snow hid her position. Even enemy drones would struggle in these conditions. Her eyes swept the ridges and valleys below. She spotted a patrol approaching from the east, unaware of her presence. One soldier moved slightly ahead of the others, scanning blindly. She exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. The rifle barked once. The lead enemy fell silently into the snow. Another shot, another enemy collapsed. Panic rippled through the group. Orders were shouted, confusion spread, and her position remained invisible. This was not killing for sport. This was precise, cold, necessary protection. Her body was failing, but she forced herself to keep moving. Frostbite crept along her left hand, making it ache with each squeeze of the trigger. She ignored it. Her stomach twisted from hunger, but she had no time to eat. Every second wasted was another second the SEALs risked exposure. She reminded herself, pain is temporary, death is permanent. She could endure a little longer. The SEALs reached the ruins of a collapsed stone structure. They huddled inside, weapons trained on every entrance, eyes scanning the storm. Hypothermia was already setting in. Fingers stiffened, lungs burned, and morale strained against exhaustion. They didn't know it yet, but someone had been walking above them for hours, covering every angle, intercepting threats before they even appeared. The sniper had chosen this fight for them, and she could not afford mistakes. She adjusted the scope again, noticing another enemy team moving down the slope to the west. They were cautious now, clearly aware that something had already beaten them once. The sniper's lips tightened. Hesitation could be fatal for anyone in this valley, especially the team below. She had no choice. She had to strike, and she had to strike perfectly. Her first shot was a whisper. The enemy soldier fell sideways into the snow, leaving the rest stunned. Panic set in, and one tried to return fire only to be eliminated by a second shot. A third ran, slipping on ice and disappearing into the storm, leaving the rest scattered and afraid. The sniper reloaded silently, heart pounding but mind clear. She had done this before. She could do it again. And she would until the team was out of the valley, alive and intact. Every kill, every calculated move came with a cost. Her body was weakening. Her senses screamed for rest. Frostbite threatened her fingers. Hunger clawed her stomach. Her legs ached from sliding across frozen rock. Yet she continued, driven not by glory or duty but by something deeper, an unshakable resolve to protect the SEALs at all costs. She had been alone for 48 hours, but she was not afraid. Fear could be lethal in a situation like this, and she had no intention of giving it power. Hours passed, patrols came and went. The SEALs moved under her cover, slowly, methodically, instinctively following the unseen guidance that saved them again and again. She never called, never signaled, never revealed herself. They didn't need to see her. They just needed to survive, and that was enough. Finally, as the first hints of evening light struggled through the storm clouds, she paused on a ridge, taking stock of the valley below. The team was still intact, though battered. The enemy had been disrupted and forced to scatter. For now, the SEALs had a fighting chance. Her body ached, her fingers were numb, and her muscles screamed in protest. But she had done what she came to do. She exhaled, letting her breath fog in the freezing air. For a moment she allowed herself to acknowledge the exhaustion, the hunger, the pain. Then she focused again. 48 hours alone had taught her that survival was about more than hiding. It was about precision, timing, and willpower. The SEALs were alive because she refused to quit, and the storm wasn't over, not by a long shot. High above, in the ghostly white of the mountains, the sniper tightened her grip, checking her scope one more time. Below, 6 operators moved like shadows, unaware of the person who had saved their lives again and again. She stayed hidden, silent, relentless. Alone, yes, but never defeated. 48 hours had passed and the fight had only just begun. The ruined stone structure offered little comfort. Snow had piled against its walls, twisting the roof into sharp, jagged angles. Inside, the SEALs huddled together, weapons cradled in frozen hands, their breaths coming in clouds that immediately vanished into the storm. Frostbite crept silently across exposed skin, stiffness spreading into fingers and toes. Every heartbeat felt heavier than the last, a reminder that time was no ally. They were trapped. Every movement carried risk. Every glance outside promised exposure. The enemy had not given up. Patrols circled the perimeter, moving in ghostly formations through the blizzard, careful not to reveal themselves entirely. They were clever, trained, and they knew the terrain. The team's only advantage was the unseen sniper high above, whose precision and timing had already turned the battle multiple times in their favor. But even she was stretched to her limits. Her body trembled from cold and fatigue, her eyes strained through frost-covered optics. Every shot drew attention. Every mistake could mean disaster. Inside, the SEAL team debated their options quietly. "We need to move," whispered the team leader, scanning the swirling snow. "We can't stay here all night. Extraction is delayed. If we wait too long, we risk encirclement." The men nodded, acknowledging the danger. Their training told them to act, but instinct warned patience. Hypothermia dulled reflexes. Muscles refused orders. Every second outside became a gamble. Outside, the sniper calculated trajectories with meticulous attention. Enemy patrols shifted positions, attempting to trap the SEALs between snowbanks and cliffs. She moved silently along a ridge, sliding and crouching, leaving false footprints to mislead anyone who dared follow her. Her fingers were numb, almost useless, but the squeeze of the trigger remained precise. Every shot she fired served a dual purpose: eliminate threats and guide the SEALs without being seen. She had become invisible, omnipresent, a shadow in the storm. A distant volley of enemy fire shattered the tense calm. One of the SEALs ducked behind a broken wall, narrowly avoiding a round that slammed into the stone beside him. Another round tore into a frozen timber, splintering it. Panic threatened to rise. The sniper exhaled, counting heads and spacing, reading the battlefield. She fired once, then twice, then another time, taking out the lead enemy soldier and creating the illusion of multiple shooters. The patrol faltered, hesitation replacing aggression. That hesitation gave the team precious seconds to regroup. The team slowly crept along the snow-crusted ground, trusting instinct and the silent signals of a sniper they couldn't see. Each step was calculated, every movement deliberate. They relied on the unseen guidance as much as they relied on their own training. The storm became both weapon and shield, masking their advance while hiding the sniper's deadly intervention. Time stretched. Hours seemed like days. The SEAL's clothing was soaked from melting snow, boots were slippery and stiff, limiting mobility. Every joint ached from forced movement through uneven, icy terrain. Hunger clawed at their stomachs, fatigue weighed on every muscle. The environment itself was lethal. One misstep could trigger injury or exposure. One miscalculation could end everything. High above, the sniper paused briefly to assess her own body. Frostbite had claimed feeling in 2 fingers. Her legs burned from exhaustion. Hunger gnawed like a living thing, twisting her stomach into knots. Yet she forced herself to remain steady, focused. Each breath measured, each heartbeat counted. She knew the SEALs' lives depended on her. She had chosen this isolation, this punishment, because she understood the stakes. Failure was unthinkable. A patrol moved closer to the structure. Snow masks shifted in the wind, creating deceptive patterns that could confuse any soldier. The sniper used this to her advantage, taking a position behind a ridge, almost invisible. She aimed, steadied her breathing, and fired. The patrol staggered back, disoriented, confused by shots that seemed to come from all directions. This was more than marksmanship. It was choreography, orchestrating chaos with the precision of a maestro. She wasn't killing for glory. She was sculpting the battlefield to keep 6 men alive. Inside, the SEALs felt the impact of her work without understanding it. Enemy forces retreated momentarily, giving the team an opportunity to move from one snow-covered shelter to another. Each move was dangerous, but the pressure had shifted in their favor. They followed the natural flow of the valley, stepping carefully over frozen boulders and icy ridges, moving as silently as possible while bullets occasionally hissed past, striking snowbanks or shattered stone near them. Hours passed. The storm's fury remained relentless, but the snipers' interventions held. The SEALs' morale, though battered, held firm. Each small victory, avoiding a patrol, escaping a sniper trap, making it through a particularly exposed slope, was a testament to their training, but also to the invisible guardian above. Trust had become instinct, unspoken and absolute. They knew the shots that came from nowhere were keeping them alive, but the identity of their savior remained a mystery. High on her ridge, the sniper's body screamed in protest. Frostbite made each movement agonizing. Hunger and thirst twisted her stomach. Exhaustion dulled muscles and sharpened senses at the same time, forcing her to compensate constantly. Yet she continued, crawling, sliding, adjusting, firing, calculating. She was almost spectral, a ghost of precision and endurance. She had endured 48 hours of isolation already, but the SEALs were still out of the valley. She would endure more. The day turned to twilight. Snow still fell, but the wind eased slightly. Visibility improved enough to identify small ridges, rocky outcrops, and shallow caves. The SEALs pressed on toward the only viable path out, unaware that every step, every decision was still being guided from above. The sniper repositioned one final time, surveying the enemy's possible escape routes. She calculated angles, timing, and likely enemy movements. Every shot from this ridge could decide life or death. She fired once, twice. A machine gun team collapsed into snow. A sniper fell from a ridge. Confusion reigned below. The SEALs moved, instinctively following the openings she had created. They were alive because she refused to quit. Her exhaustion was total, her body screaming, but she ignored it. Every second counted. Every breath mattered. She was their unseen shield. For a moment she allowed herself to breathe. 48 hours alone. Exhausted, freezing, starving, but she had succeeded again. The SEALs were still alive, and the storm was far from over. The storm had settled into a constant roar, relentless and cruel. Visibility remained low, snow scouring across the valley like a living beast, hiding danger and distorting sound. The SEAL team moved cautiously, every movement deliberate. They could no longer see their guide, but instinct told them someone was watching, directing, protecting. They didn't know who, or even if she existed, but each path they took kept them alive. The sniper above was every step, every shot, and every heartbeat. Invisible, she had become their unspoken guardian. She watched the enemy from her hidden perch, calculating each possible move. Patrols had begun coordinating, attempting to flank the SEALs, but she anticipated every maneuver. A slight shift in stance, a change in pressure, and enemy shooters would stumble into a kill zone. She fired with precision, a ghost in the snow, invisible yet deadly. Each shot was a signal, an unspoken command to guide the SEALs' movements. She never signaled directly, never made her presence known. They followed instinct, reading gaps in enemy formation, moving like shadows through the storm. Her body screamed in protest. Fingers numb from frostbite, muscles stiff and aching, hunger clawing at her stomach, yet she forced herself to move again. Sliding across ice and rock, balancing against the wind, she created openings for the team to advance. Every shot carried risk. One miscalculation could reveal her position. But failure wasn't an option. Not for her. Not with 6 lives depending on her choices. Below, the SEALs pressed forward, guided by invisible hands. They moved as a unit, trained and disciplined, responding to subtle openings in the battlefield. Enemy fire flared unpredictably, but they advanced through gaps that appeared almost magically. Every time danger peaked, shots rang out from impossible angles. Bullets tore through snow, disrupting enemy positions. Explosions of frozen debris scattered as walls of ice were shattered by well-placed rounds. The team leader moving behind the wounded operator realized what was happening. "Someone's coordinating them, someone we can't see," he muttered under his breath. His men nodded. They didn't question. In a fight for survival, clarity wasn't needed, results were. The snowstorm became a theater of calculated chaos, and they were moving in the center of it. For the sniper, this was becoming a dangerous rhythm. Patrols had learned that the SEALs were protected by something unseen. They began moving more cautiously, testing the limits of the storm, probing for a threat that never revealed itself. She responded with a mixture of patience and aggression, forcing miscalculations, drawing fire, and eliminating the most dangerous threats silently. Each action bought precious minutes and safer passage for the team. Pain had become her constant companion. Frostbite had numbed half of her left hand. A deep bruise throbbed along her ribs from sliding down a ridge earlier. Her stomach twisted with hunger, but she ignored it. She couldn't pause. The SEAL's lives depended on her precision and timing. She drew on adrenaline, habit, and sheer willpower. For 48 hours she had endured isolation, snow, and exhaustion, and now she would endure more. A squad of enemy reinforcements appeared in the valley below, approaching from a less predictable route. The SEALs spotted them too late. She was already prepared. One well-placed shot dropped the lead enemy. Another round struck the machine gunner before he could lift his weapon. Chaos erupted. The enemy scattered into snowdrifts and ruined terrain, confused and terrified by the invisible threat. The SEALs moved through the opening she had created. They understood only this: survival meant following paths that seemed random, trusting instincts they didn't fully understand. Every shot from above was both cover and instruction. Unspoken coordination became the lifeline connecting the team across the stormy battlefield. The sniper adjusted her position again, moving silently along a ridge, leaving false tracks and broken branches to mislead any pursuers. Every shift carried risk, but also opportunity. The storm, the enemy, the terrain, everything became her tool. She manipulated shadows, sound, and space to guide the SEALs forward. They didn't see her, but they felt the effect. Fatigue threatened to overwhelm her senses. Her body trembled with cold. She had not slept, had not eaten, and had been constantly exposed to the elements. Yet her mind remained razor-sharp. Each enemy movement, each sound, each flicker in the whiteout was observed and interpreted instantly. Timing was everything. 1 second too early or too late, one shot misjudged, and the SEALs could die. Hours passed like eternities. The team pushed through frozen slopes and shattered ruins, moving under a storm that seemed unending. Every misstep could be fatal, every pause could be the last. The sniper fired once to disrupt enemy movement, twice to eliminate a hidden threat, and silently signaled with the positioning of each shot. The SEALs adjusted instinctively, finding cover, moving forward, surviving again. For the first time in what felt like days, the sniper allowed herself a brief glance at the team. 6 shadows moving through the storm, unaware of her gaze, unaware that their lives were being guided by a single figure who had refused to leave them behind. They were disciplined, skilled, and trained, but without her, they would have been lost. That understanding was both a comfort and a burden. The blizzard remained relentless, the wind like knives across exposed skin, the snow filling eyes, ears, and every crack in her gear. Her body burned with pain, exhaustion, and hunger, yet she pressed on. Unspoken trust had been established between the sniper and the SEALs. They did not know her name. They did not know her face. They only knew that survival was possible, and that was enough. As darkness settled over the valley, the sniper took one last careful position for the night. She observed the last enemy patrol retreating into the whiteout. The team was still intact, still moving forward, guided by invisible hands. She exhaled slowly, letting the cold fog cloud her face. 48 hours alone had taught her patience, precision, and endurance beyond imagination. But the fight was far from over. Somewhere deep in the storm, the sniper whispered silently to herself. "Just a little longer. They'll make it. They have to." storm had not relented. If anything, it had grown harsher. Wind slammed across the ridges, carrying ice that bit at exposed skin. Visibility hovered at no more than a few meters. The SEAL team moved cautiously through the valley below, scanning every shadow, testing every slope, but now the enemy was adapting. They were clever, trained, and they had learned quickly that the team was not alone. The sniper above noticed their subtle adjustments, the small flares of light in the snow that betrayed their positions. Every decision mattered. Every second was a calculation of life or death. She had been alone for almost 2 full days, pushing past frostbite, hunger, exhaustion, and fear. Her left hand had lost almost all feeling. Fingers could barely operate the safety or the trigger. Her legs ached, joints stiff from sliding and crawling across ice. Her body screamed for rest, for warmth, for sustenance. But there was no time. The SEALs depended on her. Every step she took, every shot she fired determined whether they survived. A glint in the snow caught her eye. Not natural, not the wind. Movement, a drone. Its red eye swept across the valley, searching for threats, exposure. Panic, sudden and sharp, threatened to break her focus. She forced herself to breathe evenly, heart hammering against ribs like a drum. One shot could take it down, but it would reveal her position. One wrong move could doom everyone below. Decision had to be instantaneous. She crawled, sliding down a narrow ice ledge, using the storm to mask her approach. Her rifle aimed carefully, sighting on the drone's operator perched on a ridge. Bullet fired. Operator down. Drone fell, smashing into ice and rock, sparks scattering across the snow. For a moment, silence, but the exposure had been enough to draw enemy attention. Gunfire erupted from a position she hadn't accounted for. Snow sprayed around her as rounds tore into the ridge. The sniper's heart pounded violently. She rolled, scraping snow from her face, breath ragged, teeth chattering from cold and adrenaline. Her location had been compromised, but retreat was impossible. She couldn't abandon the team, not now. Below, the SEALs sensed the shift in enemy aggression. Fire came from multiple directions, the wind carrying the sounds oddly, making it difficult to pinpoint threats. The team leader barked orders, adjusting formations, moving toward better cover. They did not know who had protected them moments ago, but instinct told them to trust the openings that appeared. They moved, bullets snapping past, yet not one casualty was taken. The sniper was still guiding them. She shifted again, sliding down the ridge to intercept a heavy machine gun team moving to cut off the SEALs. Pain seared through her ribs from a fall earlier, but she ignored it. Fingers numb, vision blurred from frost and fatigue, she steadied herself. One shot took the lead gunner. Another struck the secondary. Chaos erupted among the enemy ranks. They returned fire blindly, panicked and disoriented. Each explosion of snow and stone covered her next movement. Every action drew attention. Every shot threatened to reveal her completely. She was alone, exposed, and stretched to her limit. Her eyes stung from ice, her mouth dry, stomach twisted in hunger. Yet the SEALs were still advancing. She refused to quit. She reminded herself, exhaustion is temporary, failure is permanent, and they could not fail. The storm worked in her favor, masking her movements. She slid along ice and rock, repositioning with precision, using natural cover. She had calculated every angle, every distance, every possibility. The enemy could not predict her. She would not allow them to predict her. High above, she paused for a moment, allowing herself a brief assessment. One patrol still moved to intercept the SEALs. Ammo was dangerously low, energy drained. Frostbite numbed more of her fingers. One misstep could end her life. But it would also end the SEALs' chances of survival. She had to act. She fired again, each shot deliberate and lethal. Lead soldiers fell. Panic spread through the enemy formation. The SEALs, sensing the chaos, pressed forward into the safety of partial cover. The sniper moved quickly, ignoring the growing pain in her body. She had created just enough diversion. The enemy was now reacting to her alone, blind to her position, while the SEALs advanced. Pain shot up her leg from a hidden bruise she had ignored earlier. Fingers felt like ice blocks around her rifle. Hunger twisted her stomach into knots. Every breath burned. Still, she pressed on, crawling along a ridge, firing intermittently, manipulating the battlefield like a conductor orchestrating chaos. She had become more than a soldier. She had become the unseen hand that directed life and death in the storm. Hours seemed endless. Every patrol, every ambush, every flash of snow and steel required vigilance. Her body teetered on the edge of collapse, yet she forced herself onward. The SEALs were counting on her. The storm was unforgiving, the enemy relentless, but she could not and would not fail. As night fell over the valley, the sniper took one last careful position for the moment. From this vantage, she could cover the SEALs' route while monitoring enemy movements. The team was still alive, still advancing though battered and weary. She exhaled, snowflakes clinging to her lashes. 48 hours alone, exposed, freezing, starving, and still she had not faltered. She had kept the team alive, but the storm and the enemy were far from finished. She whispered silently to herself, a vow carried into the howling wind. Not now, not ever, I won't let them die. The wind had finally eased, though snow still swirled in thick clouds. Visibility improved slightly, revealing jagged ridges, frozen cliffs, and treacherous gullies that had remained hidden for hours. The SEAL team advanced cautiously, boots crunching against ice and rock, weapons trained and eyes scanning every shadow. Each step carried risk, but the storm's fury had lessened enough to give hope. Every operator knew instinctively that they were close to reaching the ridge where their mysterious protector had been guiding them for almost 2 days. Above them, the sniper lay prone in a shallow depression on the ridge, barely visible through snow drifts. Her body was battered and frozen. Frostbite had claimed almost all feeling in her fingers and toes. Hunger gnawed at her stomach like a living thing. Her muscles screamed with fatigue. Pain radiated through every joint and bone, yet her eyes remained sharp behind the frosted scope. She had been waiting for this moment, the SEALs' final push toward safety. Enemy resistance had grown desperate. Patrols, machine gun teams, and sniper fire attempted to block the SEALs' route, but she had prepared for this. Carefully calculated shots dropped the lead enemies before they could engage. She created chaos among the ranks, forcing them to scatter and hesitate, buying her team precious seconds to advance. Each round fired carried both risk and reward. Her position could be revealed at any moment, yet she knew failure to act would cost lives. The SEALs moved methodically through the valley, trusting instinct and the openings created by unseen hands. Their team leader, eyes sharp despite exhaustion, recognized the pattern. "We're being guided," he muttered, "by someone up there." Each member nodded silently. No one questioned. Survival demanded trust in the unseen. The sniper shifted slightly to improve her angle, ignoring the agony in her legs and hands. Pain was irrelevant. Only the SEALs' survival mattered. A machine gun team emerged at a ridge to the southeast, their barrels trained on the operators below. She fired 3 precise rounds, the snow erupting around the guns as metal shredded. The enemy scrambled, disoriented and terrified. The SEALs advanced through the gap she had created, oblivious to the risk she had taken. Suddenly, a sniper shot rang out from across the valley. Her chest tightened. Exposure. Her position had been spotted by an enemy marksman. The SEALs were in danger. Her mind raced, calculating the angles, the terrain, the wind. She had to act instantly. Rolling behind a rock ledge, she squeezed off 2 rounds. The enemy sniper collapsed, blood staining the snow, and the SEALs continued their push. She felt every inch of exhaustion, every pang of hunger, every bite of frost, yet adrenaline surged through her veins. Her body might be failing, but her mind was razor sharp. She had become the pulse of the battlefield, the unseen force keeping 6 trained warriors alive. Every action, every calculated risk had been leading to this moment, the SEALs reaching her ridge safely. Finally, after hours that felt like lifetimes, the team neared her location. Through the blizzard, the silhouette of a figure in white against the snow caught the lead SEAL's eye. He froze, scanning. Then another operator whispered, "It's her." They recognized the form of the lone sniper who had been saving them without revealing herself. Relief, Disbelief and awe rippled through the group. The team leader motioned for the operators to move carefully. They advanced under her protective fire, the sniper continuing to cover their approach, each shot keeping the remaining enemy at bay. Snow fell heavier now, but it no longer obscured hope. They were close. Safety was within reach. One by one, the SEALs reached the ridge. The sniper kept her rifle raised, eyes scanning the horizon for threats until the last operator was under cover. Then and only then did she allow herself to breathe. The team was intact. They had survived the valley, the enemy, and the storm. For a brief moment, exhaustion overcame vigilance. She slumped against the snow, rifle slipping from frozen hands. The lead SEAL knelt beside her. "We've got you," he said, voice quiet but firm. Relief flooded through her. Her eyes met theirs, wet with fatigue and unspoken emotion. She had been alone, fighting against the elements and enemy forces for 48 hours. Now she wasn't alone anymore. Together they prepared for extraction. The SEALs secured the perimeter while she struggled to remain conscious, every nerve screaming in protest. Helicopters were finally approaching, their rotors slicing through the clearing storm. Snow whipped around them, but the worst of the blizzard had passed. Safety, once distant and impossible, was now tangible. The sniper allowed herself to look back at the valley. Enemy forces had scattered, hidden by snow and fear. Every shot, every maneuver, every calculated risk she had taken had been worth it. She had stayed when leaving would have been easier. She had risked exposure, frostbite, hunger, and death itself to ensure the SEALs survived. And now they were here. The team leader glanced at her, eyes heavy with respect and understanding. "You didn't have to do this," he said softly, "but you did." She shook her head weakly, a faint smile breaking through fatigue. "I couldn't leave," she whispered, "not when you still had a chance." Snow continued to fall, but the storm's fury had ended. Helicopters hovered nearby, ready to lift the team to safety. The valley, once a frozen trap, now seemed almost serene, silent except for the rotors and the distant wind. The SEALs moved together, steadying her as they prepared for extraction. As the rotor wash lifted snow and ice around them, the sniper allowed herself to finally release tension. 48 hours alone, exposed, starving, freezing, yet she had endured. The SEALs had survived. That was all that mattered. She was still alive, still breathing, still a ghost in the storm, but no longer invisible to those she had saved. She exhaled, letting the wind carry away exhaustion, fear, and isolation. The storm had tested her limits, her endurance, and her resolve. But in the end, she had remained unbroken. The SEALs were alive. She had survived. And for the first time in 2 days, the valley felt less like a battlefield and more like a place she had conquered, not for glory, but for survival, loyalty, and courage. High above, the mountains still loomed, jagged and cold, but they no longer held the same terror. The storm had been broken, the team had survived, and the sniper, alone, relentless, and unseen, had finally completed her silent mission. The rotors of the helicopters churned the snow into a chaotic swirl, but for the first time in 2 days, the SEALs felt a semblance of safety. The valley, once a frozen labyrinth of danger and death, now stretched beneath them in silent, snow-covered expanse. The storm had passed, leaving only the echo of wind and the harsh stillness of ice. The sniper, slumped against the slope of the ridge, allowed herself to feel the cold bite less sharply now. Survival was no longer a constant fight, it was relief, tinged with exhaustion, pain, and pride. The SEALs moved quickly, securing her as she struggled to rise. Every inch of her body ached. Frostbite had claimed her fingers and toes. Her muscles trembled uncontrollably. Hunger twisted her stomach like steel bands. She had endured 48 hours alone in one of the deadliest environments imaginable, against both nature and enemy forces, and yet she had emerged alive. She had saved 6 lives, each step guided by instinct, skill, and an iron will. And now, for the first time, she allowed herself to acknowledge it. The team leader knelt beside her, checking her vitals and voice steady but reverent. "You didn't just save us, you carried this mission alone. We owe you more than we can ever repay." She shook her head weakly, snow clinging to her hair, lips cracked and blue from cold. "I didn't do it for thanks," she whispered. "I did it because it had to be done. There was no other choice." The SEALs guided her toward the waiting helicopters. Each step was assisted, careful, deliberate. The air lifted slightly, colder gusts cutting through the valley, but the immediate threat had vanished. Enemy patrols were gone, disoriented or destroyed. The blizzard had broken, leaving a clear path to safety. And for the first time, the sniper could breathe without fear of being the only line of defense. As she was lifted onto the helicopter, her mind replayed the last 48 hours in brutal clarity. Every shot fired, every movement calculated, every danger anticipated. It had all been necessary. Every second of exposure, every pang of hunger and frostbite had been weighed against the lives of the 6 SEALs who now depended on her. She had chosen solitude, isolation, and exhaustion as tools, weapons, and shields. Alone, she had become unstoppable. Yet she had also been invisible, a ghost whose actions would never appear on mission reports, never be credited officially. Inside the helicopter, heat finally seeped into her bones. Medics attended to frostbite and injuries, warming her body, administering fluids and helping her regain strength. The SEALs watched quietly, their respect palpable. They spoke little of the horror and chaos they had endured. They only spoke of trust. Trust in each other and trust in the unseen sniper who had guided them through death itself. One of the operators broke the silence. "I don't know who you are, but we owe you our lives." She allowed herself a faint smile, weak and tired. "I'm not here for recognition," she said softly. "I'm here because someone had to be." The helicopters lifted off, carrying the team toward base and safety. Below, the valley stretched endlessly, snow and ice covering the horrors and victories alike. The storm had left a landscape both beautiful and deadly, and within it she had survived against impossible odds. Her mind replayed the moments she had fought to keep them alive, the machine gun team she had eliminated, the ambush she had disrupted, the patrols she had silently herded into chaos. Each memory was a testament to endurance, skill, and sacrifice. As the team neared base, communication channels buzzed to life. Command had been searching, fearing the worst. Now, hearing that the SEALs were alive, they scrambled to receive the team, unaware that one of their own had been missing for nearly 2 days, fighting a war alone against the elements and the enemy. The sniper allowed herself a moment of reflection, feeling the weight of the mission finally lift, though the memories would never fade. The team leader finally spoke again, his voice quiet, heavy with respect. "You didn't just save us, you changed the outcome. Without you, we wouldn't have made it, not one of us." His gaze was steady, unflinching. "I don't know if anyone will ever fully understand what you did, but I do." For the first time, she felt the enormity of her actions. Not the tactical brilliance, not the timing or precision, but the humanity behind them. She had acted out of loyalty, courage, and an unwavering sense of duty. 48 hours alone in the storm had tested every limit of body and mind. She had survived because she refused to quit. She had guided the SEALs to safety because she could not leave them behind. The helicopters landed, and the SEALs moved to secure the area. Medics carried her inside to warmth and safety. Snowflakes clung to her hair and uniform, remnants of a storm that had almost claimed them all. She allowed herself to rest, eyes closing briefly, letting exhaustion wash over her like a tide. Outside, the sun began to break through the clouds for the first time in days. The valley, once a frozen trap, now glimmered in pale light, serene yet foreboding. The storm was over, but the memory of it and her role in surviving it would remain etched forever. She had been alone. She had endured. She had saved lives. And though recognition might never come, she carried a quiet satisfaction. The SEALs were alive because she had refused to leave. As she finally rose to stand, supported by the team leader, her lips curved in a faint, tired smile. 48 hours alone, a blizzard, enemy forces, frostbite, hunger, and exhaustion, all had been survived. The SEALs were safe. That was enough. That was all that mattered. And in the quiet aftermath of the storm, the sniper allowed herself to feel one thing fully: pride in having endured the impossible, unseen and unbroken. The team moved together toward extraction. The helicopter blades hummed above. Snow swirled and drifted, but the valley no longer felt like a battlefield. For the first time, she felt like more than a ghost. She was a survivor, a protector, a lone sniper who had gone for 48 hours and had returned victorious.